In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to have difficult conversations effectively and without losing it.
Your someday starts today. It's time to explore and test the newest science, methods, and trends for creating a life you love with your host, Tanya MFK. Welcome to My Designed Life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to My Design Life, where we learn and test the latest science, tips, tools, and strategies for you to create your best life every day. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at My Design Life Show and at Tanya MFK. And if watching videos isn't your thing, head over to the My Design Life Show podcast and catch the audio. I'm Tanya MFK, and I am so glad that you're here. We are going to talk about something that every single person in this world needs because it affects all of us. And that is crucial conversations. Those tough and uncomfortable and often emotion-filled conversations that need to be had, but we all tend to avoid. But first, last week we talked about the power of visualization, and we learned that science backs up this incredible practice. We learned how it affects the brain and how we can use it easily on a daily basis to create the life that we want and reach goals we never thought possible. I challenged everyone to try it once a day for that week, and I got some incredible messages from all of you, from breakthroughs with limiting beliefs to success stories, funny stories, and more. Thank you so much for sharing with me. Now, if you're interested in learning how to use this amazing tool, go back and check out the episode easily named Visualization for Everyday Success. And as always, we give you action tools to get started, so make sure to download the visualization worksheet and get going. Now, let's get to our next guest and learn how to have some tough conversations with ease.
Welcome to My Designed Life.
My next guest is a leadership coach, master trainer, and organizational development expert, having trained leaders and management teams in 40-plus countries across continents. Her company, Exponential, teaches people key elements to success, and we're not just talking about sales and marketing here. True leaders must master skills such as accountability, how to influence, the power of habits, and crucial conversations. And as it is said, a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. She is here today to teach us how to have this dialogue successfully in our business and relationships and ultimately our lives. Please join me in welcoming Shivangi Walke. Hi, Shivangi.
Hello. Hi, Tanya. Wow, that's a glorious introduction. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes.
I think it's such a pleasure to always speak with you, Tanya.
Oh, thank you so much. And honestly, I am so excited about this topic because there is not one person on this planet that will not be faced with an uncomfortable conversation, and how we handle them can make or break relationships and connections, whether it be a boss, a colleague, a loved one. So I'm excited. I just want to jump right in and just start to tell us what a crucial conversation really is.
So two things that I'd like to say there, right? I mean, one is what qualifies as a crucial conversation. And for me, there is like a gut level response to that. I think usually a conversation that we are avoiding is probably a crucial conversation, right? It's the sort of conversation that we would rather not have, but we know that is very important to have. And we know that it's probably because we have opposing opinions with somebody on a high stakes issue, and we are aware that our emotions have got entangled in, right? So these are not conversations which remain at a very cognitive level and you're having a very rational conversation. No, I think a conversation becomes crucial when our emotions kick in. And I think that's the challenge of these conversations, because we are actually very justified in behaving. We think we're very justified in behaving in a particular way, which in the long run we regret. So that's a very special thing around these crucial conversations, right? And like you rightly said, we all have these, and there is a lot of research that shows that leaders who are very effective, especially who are able to marry both these elements of getting the results and also being liked by their employees or their teams, they are actually the same when things are going okay. But when things are not going okay, they have mastered the skill set of managing those difficult conversations, right? So it's really a skill set that is definitely very important for leaders, but it is important for you and me. I mean, it's important for every person, because we all have these instances when we need to speak about uncomfortable things which might be in disagreement with people on high stakes issues.
Right. Or like you said, emotionally charged. I mean, we can, I think, take this down to something as simple as conversations that we see play out on Facebook, where people, the political climate, people get very charged up about that. And then they start having things that are not as effective in their communication when they start to feel personal about something, right? And they want to get a point across, yet instead they come across combative and usually ends up in fighting, right? It usually ends up in some sort of fight or disagreement.
And again, I think that is the challenge, right? I mean, we are living in an increasingly polarized world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think mechanisms like Facebook and LinkedIn, I mean, it becomes so much easier for us to put our opinions out there, right? And then you see people commenting on things, and things can quickly become quite disrespectful.
Yes.
Now, the challenge, of course, is not that we should not be saying things which are not aligned to what somebody else is saying, but the challenge is, how do you do that in a way that still remains respectful, right? Because disagreement by its own nature feels very difficult to us. But when we are so stuck on a particular point of view, we need to find a way in which we can be heard. Because that's the challenge, right? When you just throw around these comments, and I read a lot online like you do, Tanya, and then I just think, okay, so how did that help, and what has it achieved, right? Like, what's the impact of that? You just threw out your opinion out there, and how did it land, and how did it make the person on the receiving end feel, and what have you now achieved by creating
right. And that's, speaking of crucial conversations, I think that's a crucial question. What have you achieved? Because a lot of times, like you defined it as, it's something where there's an emotional charge that can be in the situation, something that more times than not usually avoiding, perhaps it's uncomfortable, that if we're just throwing out how we feel to get it off the table and going, well, this was uncomfortable, so here it is, I don't like you. You haven't actually given anything to that conversation other than your opinion or feeling. There hasn't been any situation of resolution or where do we go from here, right?
Yeah. And I think that is the challenge, right? Once you master the art of crucial conversations, not only do you get results, but you strengthen your relationships. And I really feel that results and relationships are so interrelated. It's very difficult for you. Maybe you can get results in the short term, by speaking with people and command and control, and that sort of, incentives and all of that. But that's short term, right? To get long-term sustainable results, you need engaged people. And to have engaged people doesn't mean that you do not disagree with them. It just means you work on the how of the disagreement. So you mentioned an interesting example around, we feel uncomfortable and we sort of throw the information out there, hoping that it will land and the other person will somehow, do something about it.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, that doesn't work, right? So we're always thinking about, okay, so if this is a situation, what are the facts of the situation? And what is the story I'm telling myself about it? It's very natural for us to tell stories around the facts, and it's very difficult for us to differentiate in our minds the difference between a fact with something which is measurable, something that you can see, something that you can hear, as compared to all the ways in which we interpret it, we judge it, we evaluate it, we attribute things to it. I mean, all of this stuff is actually a story, it's not a fact. But when we are emotionally charged and when we are in disagreement, our stories start feeling like facts to us. In this particular skill development, there's a lot of self-reflection that is involved, separating really the facts of the matter from the story we are telling ourselves, and then soliciting the story of the other party. And I think that is very difficult to do at times, because we're so stuck on our interpretation of the facts that to listen to a completely different point of view is a struggle for us. But if we start rewinding that tape and we really start saying, okay, what are the facts? This is how I look at it. Now let me have somebody else add meaning, to this shared pool of information that we have. Keep it as fact-driven as possible. Then there might be an opportunity for you to listen to the other person, which might then help you to see how your story is probably different than their story, right? Stories are about perspectives, and they are about the little backpack that we have in terms of our experiences, our values, our beliefs. All of that is going to be helping us to make sense. And stories is something very easy to do, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not something that is very well planned or something. It just happens intuitively. But sometimes these stories that we tell ourselves, they can be dysfunctional,
Oh.
especially during the times when it is a conversation was crucial, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's so much to it I want to unpack there. So, one thing is that when we get into these conversations, more times than not, we, hopefully we've been practicing this skill, right? We've been listening to Shivanga here. We've taken some of her classes. We've been learning some of the skills to develop. But when we're in the moment, when we don't know, we don't always know we're about to go into a crucial conversation, right?
Exactly.
Like there are
Yes.
times we absolutely do. I think for some of those in leadership roles, we may have to speak with an employee. We may have to speak with somebody and go, wait, I already know this is uncomfortable. I know for myself, I've played the other side in the past of being that passive person, where I'd have to fire somebody and I was so nervous about not wanting to upset them. They weren't even sure they were being fired because I was dancing around the issue because it was so uncomfortable. So sometimes you're going to go into these conversations, you need to have it, you've been avoiding it. And then like Shivangi is saying is that there's other times where you're in it and it pops up. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
whoa,
it's a normal conversation and it suddenly goes crucial, right?
right.
So, a normal business conversation, when we are not on our guard, right? See, it's not that we need to use these skills all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but the earlier we can learn to look at signs in the other person and also in ourselves that the conversation has gone crucial, then we
Mm-hmm.
can start using these skills, right? So I'm not suggesting that you need to be on guard all the time. I mean, it's very tiring, right? And like you rightly said, there are some situations where we know this is going to be difficult. I mean, a
Yeah.
typical conversation, a typical promotion conversation, let's say between a boss and an employee, where the employee thinks that, they've done everything and they deserve a promotion, and the boss probably has a lot of developmental feedback and doesn't seem the employee is ready. I mean, there are
Right.
so many such instances, or between two peers, you're on a
Mm-hmm.
team and where you feel you're taking most of the workload and the other peer is not doing that much, but they're still, sort of showing more around what they're doing to the boss. And the boss may be thinking that this person is delivering even more. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
these sort of, uncomfortable conversations. And I mean, of course, there is a power element in there, right? I mean, the
Mm.
sort of situation that you mentioned, Tanya, when you were going to fire an employee, actually the employee's power in that situation was very low, right?
Right,
And
right,
that time, yes, you were very uncomfortable, but the thing is that the employee has, in a way, you could say, no way out, right?
right,
So
right,
yes, is that conversation crucial? Yes, it is. It is a difficult conversation, but it's probably, and it's maybe even high stakes for you, maybe more emotionally, but
right,
it's far more high stakes for the employee, right?
right.
And I think that you had decision making power there. A lot
Mhm.
of the time when we speak about crucial conversations, it is when both these parties have equal power
Mm.
in the situation.
Right,
Both, maybe for different reasons, the situation is high stakes, but it's not usually that one person decides,
right,
because then the
right.
power changes, right? And
Gotcha.
of course, power has a big implication on everything that we do and everything that we experience. And of course, when I train leaders and giving difficult messages, that is a different sort of conversation. You're reading yourself more emotionally, you're collecting facts, but it's a decision. You're conveying a decision you've made. I'm speaking about conversations which you don't know in the beginning that are going to go crucial.
Right, right,
Now you don't know how to handle those because your physiology is going to, more or less compel you to go into fight or flight. That's what the
mm.
physiology is going to do. I mean,
Right,
we've heard about this, right? We are not on the savannah anymore. We do not have physical threats, from the saber-toothed tiger anymore. But what we have in today's society are social threats. These are social threats that might be linked to our status. These might be linked to the sense of fairness we feel, the sense of competence we feel, the
mm.
insult or the respect we feel. I mean, these are all social threats. However, is the same region of the brain that is getting impacted by the social threat, right? As it was on the savannah with the physical threat. And that's why we react automatically, physiologically, with the fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's
Mm.
what we do. And
Right,
what
flight
we
or
are doing
freeze.
now in learning more or less about ourselves more, so for example, I ask my trainees to think about, remember of these, conversations that have been crucial for you, and you were very stressed, what are the physical cues that you notice in yourself? For example, for some people, they might start sweating, might start feeling itchy in the fingers, heart. I mean, for me, my heart starts pounding, like it becomes so loud, the pounding, that it almost physically becomes difficult for me to listen to what the other person.
Right.
So the more you're aware about, how you react physically and how other people might react. So when you look for these in crucial conversations training, we call them the signs of silence, where people actually stop contributing information to continue in dialogue, or violence, where people then go like that, and their voice increases, and they might do a fist thing on the table, and all of those are like more violent or more push ways to get the information in. But both of these actually mean that the psychological safety in that situation is lost, right? Either when they go super quiet or when they become, verbally violent.
Right. They're almost like defending, they're getting more aggressive. They're, we don't mean like they might not physically be harming someone, but just your actions are getting more animated and out there. And I know for myself, like, I think I'll tend to hold the breath a little more. I'm kind of like, ooh, like tensing up. And then depending on which side of the conversation I'm on, I know for myself, I would definitely get emphatic and louder, I'm like, but then it's like this, and sometimes it's even when I'm just excited about something, I'm like, but you don't get it. This is amazing. So I know that's
And I don't know, Tanya, if you've noticed, some of us, and I mean, especially I can speak for myself, the more mindfulness practice I do, I can almost see that downward spiral we are going in, and of course I'm contributing to it, and I realize, the tension, because of course it's possible, right? At any particular point for both the parties involved to just say, you know what? This is not leading to anything. We've gone away from discussing the content, which is usually the starting point of whatever that conversation might be, to now start blaming each other. I mean, this is very common that happens between, partners and spouses. Things start at one place and then they go in all sorts of other directions.
Right.
And you can see this predictable downward spiral.
Start pulling things out from the past, right?
Yes. All sorts of stuff which is not relevant for that situation. But why are we doing that? And that's why it's important to know ourselves, right? We're doing that because we're scared. It's actually fear that is bringing that. So we're doing that. We feel that it is ammunition at that moment, right? We feel that it's something that we have that can make our view in this situation stronger.
Right.
Usually it doesn't help, because then that sort of behavior brings the same sort of defensive behavior from the other person. And that's why this downward spiral is
we go into this self-preservation mode, and then it's no longer about the issue. It's about saving yourself, even though, like you said, there's no physical threat. We don't have that going on anymore. Well, so how, other than observing ourselves and having ideally the mindfulness about us enough to be aware when we're in a crucial conversation to like pay attention to how we feel and the actions we do, is there a way for us to learn some of these skills without screwing it up in a crucial conversation the first time?
Well, as I said, that some of these skills are not that difficult to understand cognitively, but they are still very difficult to put it in practice. So, and as I said, and I think I said that to you before, there is this lovely book called Crucial Conversations. You can read around that, and a lot of people, I mean, it's a New York Times bestseller. There is, there is an online course around it. I do a lot of in-person trainings or live online trainings on it. I felt though the magic is in the practice. Because you can understand a lot of this stuff cognitively, and it's a necessary first step. I'm not going to deny that, right? But then it's about converting this understanding, which is at a more cognitive level, to applying it. And I can tell you for a fact that this is a lifelong journey. Right. Because, as I said, you're continuously, you're working against your physiology. And it's easier said than done, right? I mean, you might understand everything, and yet in that situation, when you are feeling that threat, you're going to behave in a way which is not productive, but feel extremely justified in that.
Right.
So, and that is something very special. And the other thing I have noticed is how is the relationship with that person pre that conversation, right? Because I think that also starts mattering. So let's say you have a new boss employee relationship, or if you have a new peer in the team, and if a conversation goes crucial, that conversation will have a very different flavor, a very different tenor to it, as compared to somebody maybe who's like your mentor, and they are giving you some difficult feedback, and maybe you are trying to assimilate that, but you realize, and I mean, this is the difference between the content of what's being said and your judgment on what you think the intent of what they're saying is, right? So are they saying, is this person who's giving me negative feedback, are they doing that to put me down, or are they doing that because they want to me to be better, they want to lift me up, right?
Right.
And
That goes with that story you're telling
that's the
yourself.
story, and it's an automatic judgment. We function from that story, but we are not very aware of that story, right?
Yeah.
And all of this is very, very automatic, right? We see and hear something, we very quickly tell ourselves a story, and then we react based on that story that we have told ourselves, right? But that storytelling piece is so quick, it's happening in milliseconds, that we are not even aware of it, right? I mean, coming back to mindfulness, this is, I think, the power of putting a pause between stimulus and response. A lot of us, we just react, right? We react, and we think that we can't help but react, but we can. We can always make a choice, right?
Yes.
Requires practice again. And
there's no such thing as he made me mad. Actually, it was a choice to be mad, and
we
and
make ourselves mad,
yeah,
right?
and you
because
said
of
earlier,
the story we tell ourselves.
and you said earlier about, like, we act a certain way because we feel justified, and the thing is, it's like, you can ask maybe 10 people around you and we go, yeah, that was justified, but justified doesn't necessarily mean that it brought results. If someone was screaming at you and you're like, well, I screamed back, they're like, well, that was justified because he was screaming at you. And then what? Nothing came of
Nothing
it.
is achieved, right? Results are not achieved. The relationship is destroyed. This will make the atmosphere of the team more difficult to work with. That's why I said, that's why this downward spiral is very pernicious, right? And that's why these skills are such critical leadership skills.
And it's a skill. I want to emphasize that. It is a skill. It's not just a tactic or a hack, guys. This is something, like she said, yes, you can know cognitively, but it really requires actual practice, like any other skill. I can cognitively understand how to play tennis, but I still am not a great tennis player because I don't go out there and play on the field. I haven't, or I don't even know if it's courts. It's called a court. See, that's how good I am. So on the tennis court, you have to go out there and actually put it into practice. And that's something you guys do in your workshops and things like that, you were saying, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of, we put people in different situations, like a role play situation where we have given both the participants, one of them plays a role of somebody who has something to disagree with the other person. They both get like slightly different scripts that they're playing. And then we always have a third participant as a coach, who's observing, and they received both their scripts, right? And the whole idea is, and we built it, I mean, it's a little bit like these Lego blocks, right? On the first day, it's a 2-day training that I do, very impactful when done live, but nowadays I'm, thanks to coronavirus, I'm doing a lot of this stuff now online, and it does work, right? Putting people into small breakout rooms and so on. But the whole idea is that we build it in little steps, like Lego blocks, right? So we learn a particular skill that is associated with it, then we practice it, then we build up on that a little bit, then we practice it. And the whole idea with the coach is, when you're practicing it, the coach is able to give you, as the person who, so there's a respondent and there is an initiator of the case, right? So the initiator is the focus in terms of receiving feedback, and the respondent is trying to make the situation as real life as possible, of course based on the script, but really not overdoing it, not making it too easy, right? And again, as I said, this whole thing then needs to happen in real life, and then a lot of that is dependent on us, right? So let's assume I had a crucial conversation with one of my business partners this morning. Now the onus is on me. I'm going to just sit there later this afternoon and say, okay, so what really happened? What did I say? What did he say? And, how have now we achieved, arrived at a point where we seem as if we're stuck. This whole thing around stuckness is what we are trying to trying to dismantle, right?
Right.
Because being stuck has huge impacts on relationships and on business results. And we feel stuck because chronically we are not able to arrive at certain solutions. And I think so crucial conversations is much more about working in a way so that your relationship works, because unless a relationship works, you're not going to get the results that you want.
Right. Right. Well, and these, and again, we said, business and personal, that's how it works in everything. You mentioned a little while back in the conversation about, perhaps a colleague, that you didn't feel is carrying their weight, and you're working on a project together and you have something you need to accomplish. And so coming out and saying, hey, you're not carrying your weight he's not going to usually yield good results. It puts that person on defense. It's not focusing on how to deal with it. But at the same time, it's a discussion that needs to be had. Otherwise, you're harboring your resentment. You're frustrated. Everyone's miserable on the project. You're probably acting like a jerk. And I think a lot of people can take this situation very easily into, partner situation at home where you're going, well, I feel like I'm doing everything. And again, now this is the story you're telling yourself, because they may feel the same way, that look at me, I'm doing everything. And then you jump into it without checking the story, checking the facts, right? That was some of the big points you brought up, is really going, I need to talk to them about this. This needs to come up. But if you come in with your story and not the facts, you're automatically entering this conversation like just doomed, right? Just
So that's the thing, right? I mean, you've heard about that also in negotiation skills trainings. We always talk about the common ground, right? So the common ground or the facts are something that you can both agree on.
Yeah.
And it's very important to start with something that you can agree on, because otherwise the conversation goes crucial right in the beginning, right? So you're stating the facts and then you're narrating your story, which might feel like a fact to you, but it's a story. And you're narrating a story like a story. And then you're inviting them to share how do they look at it. I mean, coming back to this example with the colleague, maybe they have a completely different point of view. Maybe they actually think, I mean, who am I to judge, right? Maybe they think these are the different parts of a project. And yes, they might be putting in less hours in terms of achieving it, but the work is more creative or the work is more repetitive. I mean, whatever their story is, right? So it's so important to state your story like a story and then invite them to say, how do you look at it? So those words are very important. I'm wondering, what do you think about that? What is your view of this thing? You have to neutralize, the question in a way that it doesn't seem as if you're putting them in the spot.
Right.
So that's the skill we learn, right? We state the facts, we tell our story, but like a story, not in a very forceful way. We tell our story.
Right. I love that. That's so key. Like we tell our story saying like, so this, and I've heard Brene Brown actually say this. She'll even say like, the story I'm telling myself is she has a story about her and her husband getting into this, and she's really frustrated with him and she's feeling ignored. And she's like, he obviously doesn't even care. She was telling him some heartfelt, thing. And he was just kind of blowing her off. And so she was like, this is ridiculous. Like, he's being such a jerk. And so the story she's telling herself. And then right before she actually had the conversation, she thought about it. And then she told him, she said, the story I'm telling myself right now is that you're not listening to me, that you don't care what I have to say. So she said the thing she was feeling, but she prefaced it by saying, this is the story I'm telling myself. And I love that. So maybe with a colleague, you could say, you can say like, look,
I'm telling myself, right?
Yeah, I'm feeling very overworked. I'm tired on this project. Maybe those are some of the facts. We're not finished yet. That could be a fact. And then you're going, and the story that I'm feeling or hearing or experiencing is that, you don't really care as much about this. So
now this is the other little thing there, right, Tanya?
Right.
Instead of saying, I don't think you care about something, you make an I statement, because I statements, they actually reduce defense, right? So instead of saying, you don't care about me, you say, I feel I'm not cared for. It's saying the same thing, but the way you're saying it, it reduces defense. See, we are learning skills to start and remain in dialogue, right? That's what
Right.
we are trying to do. To
Mm-hmm.
remain in dialogue is a very tricky thing. It's very easy to just trigger people by the words, the choice of words, the tone that we use,
Oh
and
yeah.
the way in which we emphasize. That's why I said the story needs to be told like a story. The story cannot be told like facts. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you tell your story like facts, they will hear it like facts and they will defend,
Right.
right? And that's why it's very important. State your facts as facts, usually neutral, usually nothing that you can argue on because they're facts. Then you say, this is the story I'm telling myself, and then invite them saying, what is your perspective on this? What am
Right.
I missing here? Because invariably you're missing something, right? You're definitely missing their way of looking at things.
Yeah.
And I think there is, of course, this internal click that you need to have when you go in these conversations. And I think, like in a lot of leadership training, right? The more you have experienced it, the more natural it becomes for you. In the
Yes.
beginning, this
Like
is
any
going to be,
skill.
yeah, it's going to seem artificial, right? This whole thing of, oh, start with the facts and then tell a story and ask a question. This is going to seem artificial and also probably difficult. But the more you do it, the more you'll feel, wow, this is
Yeah.
really getting the results and it's keeping the relationship. Because now you've given the other person the opportunity to tell their story, and hopefully they also have the skills to tell their story as a story. You
Mm-hmm.
have both added to what we call as this pool of shared meaning. You have remained in dialogue, and then the conversation can go back towards becoming a more rational business conversation, right? So
Right.
these are all tools that we are learning to create that psychological safety, to learn to look of signs of, why the other person might be feeling unsafe, and then recalibrating so that you can bring them away from this more natural physiological, fight or flight response to saying, let's remain in dialogue,
Yeah.
right? And that's really the skill.
And if we're asking, if we've stated our facts and then we share our story and then we say, what do you think? I think another part of that skill is really being ready to honestly listen, right? That you enter this conversation with the end result goal being a solution, not the end result goal of getting out your jab or getting out your just venting, right? I just want you to know that I'm tired of this. Like that, there's no point in having that conversation if it's just to vent. It's always should be geared towards some sort of resolution, some sort of final situation, and to be ready to honestly listen, right?
That
Like,
is so true, right? And that's why it's so important, even before the conversation. And if you have the luxury of like planning this conversation, to ask yourself, what do I really want?
mm-hmm.
And that question of what do I really want is not just for what do I really want for me, because that's a very self-centered way of looking, right?
Right.
It's what do I really want for me? What do I really want for the other person in this conversation? What do I really want for us, this in between that we have, right? Us and
Right.
our relationship. And what do I really want for the organization? And all those four questions need to be answered, right? Sometimes we cognitively skip it and we actually say, the organization and the results are the most important, but then the conversation doesn't feel real because a lot of people are continuously saying, oh, but this is about business results, so on. But the fact is that our emotions are tangled in, they are in there and they are real. It's
We're
not that when we
humans
come to
working
work,
in the
yeah,
organization
we
or
are,
in
and
the
we cannot
family.
lock our emotions out of the office, throw the
Mm-hmm.
key, and then come and have these conversations. We can't, right? So it's very important to ask those questions. And I think especially that third question around what do I want for my relationship with this person
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
very important one, because that helps us to remain and do all of those things which might feel very difficult, right? Sticking to
Yeah.
this story as a fact story and asking the question, this might not feel very easy to do. But once you know, and this is where the short term and the long term perspective comes into the picture, right? Because the short term, you might want to achieve something, and you might even achieve it in a way, very cleverly posturing and telling all these things. But then the person leaves from the room and then they feel manipulated, and then they feel that, what happened in that conversation, you were very articulate, you were very prepared, but this is the outcome that they have now agreed to, is not something that they actually agreed to. It just happened in that
Right.
conversation. So you see, the
Right.
stuckness then remains, and the relationship is going to be impacted negatively. And that's why these skills are so much about self-reflection and really asking yourself, what do I want? And what do I want, not just in the short term and achieving this project and this task, which of course is important, but what do I want long term, for myself,
Right.
with this person
Right.
and for this organization, right? I mean, we talk a lot about team working and things like that. I mean, it's so easy to sort of second guess somebody and avoid a little task here and do these sort of things, but people are always watching, and I think people are also always registering what's happening at an energy level, right? So the
Right.
more authentic you are, even if that authenticity means that you need to say, I'm feeling frustrated, that is fine. That is
Right.
fine. You
Right.
just need to find a way to say that is respectful and say, you frustrate me. That will create defense.
Oh,
I'm
right.
feeling,
Yeah. That's a whole other way
it's a
of
whole
coming to
other
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and the thing is too, is that when you come into the situation, again, if you're just, gonna lash out or do something, it doesn't help the project. It doesn't help anything else. So as you're working on this and being authentic, I in my head, I keep hearing the idea of people like, well, I can just put that aside and I can put up with it, right? Just grin and bear it and get through it. But you're doing more damage to yourself. You're not going to look forward to working on this project. Work is going to become this frustrating thing that you don't want to deal with. So you're suffering more because you're avoiding this conversation, because you think it's easier to just not have it, to not have to be honest, to not learn these skills and learn how to do it properly, because it might be weird or they might say something weird. And that's one of the questions I actually wanted to ask, is that I think in this situation, there are people who may go, okay, Shivangi, I'm listening. I got you. I can practice these things. But, what if the other person, they haven't taken this course. They feel defensive. They lash out. They're not going to get it. And I think that can hold people back from wanting to do it the right way, quote unquote. Like, do you have any advice in that situation?
I
Or
mean,
to
this
go
is
over that
this is
fear?
not a silver bullet, right? I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
the times that I work in organization, that's the reason that they roll it out across employee levels and across leaders at different levels, right? Because when done well, it's a micro skill. It's a micro skill around conversation between two people. But of course, I think your point is right. If you are the one who is bringing this skill set and you are trying your best to remain neutral, starting with facts, etc., and the other person ends up saying things which then you notice are,
Yeah, they're like, you're
impacting
just a
you.
jerk. You never get it. You're like
Yeah.
trying your best.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as I said, we're all human beings and we'll probably not take this really well, right? Now,
Right.
of course, I have seen leaders who can handle these situations also beautifully,
Hmm.
right? So when somebody says that, instead of feeling agitated, they comment. And I think I speak about this thing around labeling, right? Labeling is a key skill. So when somebody says something, and you're actually feeling very angry, instead of now just responding from an angry place, you label what you're feeling. So I say to you, maybe you said something very offensive to me, and then Tanya, and I say to you, Tanya, as I'm listening to the words that you just used, I'm finding myself feeling very frustrated. In fact,
Mm.
I'm even finding myself feeling very disrespected and very angry. And I know this is not, something that's going to get us the results that you want. So I do not want to react from that space, even if you're trying to engage me maybe in that conversation. Is
Right.
this a good time to continue the conversation, or you need some more time and maybe we can take it tomorrow?
I love
So
that.
I
And all
think,
you've done is
especially the other person,
identify your own feelings
and
and, like
named
you
them.
said, label them and name
Yes,
them.
label
That's
them. Label them.
brilliant.
Label them. And as I said, if the person is really, very agitated, is really not in a good spot, it's fine to postpone the conversation,
Yeah.
right? And also responding to what you said earlier, right? Can it always be that you are the person who's trying to do the best and the other person is always unreasonable? And my experience is, the more you get better at these skills, it becomes very difficult for the other person to become very unreasonable.
Yeah.
It
It's
does,
kind of
right?
leading by
Because
example almost. They
yeah,
start to
and I mean,
realize,
so
like,
see, they said something very nasty, and now you're responding like that instead of you increasing your voice, etc. And now they don't know. They're like
yeah.
all confused, like they don't know what they're going to say, because usually these things happen when both sides are adding energy and violence, and what you mentioned.
Right. That's the
Right?
escalation.
So
They kind of
you,
feed off
yeah,
each other.
they feed off each other. So when they say something and you don't feed off, but it doesn't mean that you're disowning it neither are you switching off. You're just naming your feelings
Mm-hmm.
and you're letting that settle in.
Yeah.
And then you're watching them, right? And what is it that they are saying? Now, I'm not suggesting, that this stuff works all the time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there are times in our life that we need to say, is this a battle worth fighting?
Right.
And that's why I said,
Right.
I mean, there are multiple times, and I've been a practitioner for well over a decade of these skills, but there are many times when I choose not to engage at that level, because at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, I can tell you, as cathartic as it can be, after having a crucial conversation, you also feel very tired, because you have
Yeah.
really expended yourself and the energy required, to be in that particular space. And at times you might just decide, again, asking that question, what is it that I want? I don't want this, I don't want to
Right.
spend
Right.
my time, energy. So it's a choice. I think what we're learning is to be choiceful rather than
Mm-hmm.
being reactive.
Right.
So
Right.
not getting hooked on to those escalation mechanisms, even if the other
Mm-hmm.
person might be both consciously or unconsciously. I think a lot of
Right.
people do this stuff unconsciously, right?
Oh yeah, it's
Not
knee-jerk
as if,
reactions, I
yeah,
think,
it
because
is. I mean,
because no one's teaching us these skills in school. So we're
yes.
learning to just knee-jerk react, and then we don't question it as we get older. And because the general population reacts this way, we're not usually calling each other out on it. We're like, well, that's how Gina acts, and that's how Sarah acts, and so I'm normal because I act the same way, and everyone's just as frustrated. So it's fine. And I
And
love that you
even
said
because, right?
sometimes. Oh, sorry.
Right, even in like the way you were brought up. Sorry, sorry.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I like that you even mentioned like to ask yourself about whether or not you need to even continue this. Is it worth the battle? Because there are times where, and I think this is important to bring up, that it's not just always about putting up with it. It's about dealing with it well, but there may be times where the relationship, colleague, family, whatever that is, right, in your personal life, is you realize this is not worth this battle, and it's more beneficial to dissolve the relationship, right? And in either situation, it's not dissolved because of a fight. It's like you said, I think you used the word choiceful, which I like. It was like a
Be choiceful, yeah.
yes, it was really
Choiceful.
going, you know what, now that I look at what I want and how this is playing out, I'm going to make this choice, as opposed to going, he was such a jerk and this, oh, that's it, and cutting them off that way. And the other thing I wanted to bring up before I forgot was, in the discussion we talked about with somebody who is trying to do it the right way, handling the crucial conversation using these skills, and somebody who is being perhaps very combative, someone without those skills. Then we start to label our feelings and use that as a conversation. What I love, and I wanted to point out, is that you didn't say, you are making me feel disrespected. Because that, I think I can hear people going, well, look, you're obviously not ready to have this conversation, so you need to go calm down, right? And I think that's something
Yeah,
we hear
this will again
so.
put somebody. So this is the thing, right? That's why I always speak about I statements.
Yes.
You can own your own feelings. So instead of saying you are doing this and you make me, get so angry and you are I just say I. Use the word I instead of you. You're saying the exact same thing, but
Right.
own it, right? Own it.
Right.
Because sometimes, and I don't know if you have noticed that, right? You interact in a particular way, maybe with 3 different people, and they all have completely different reactions. So you were
Mm-hmm.
pretty much you doing maybe pretty much the same thing, right? I mean, I remember there have been occasions when I had to give developmental feedback to my team members, right? And
Mm.
I was equally prepared. I had the facts. Of course, it felt uncomfortable, but it needed to be said. And I was all prepared. And I just realized that, and these 3 people were not in the same but similar roles, that they reacted so differently, right? So
Mm.
even if your behavior, if you have reached that skill level that your behavior is fairly consistent across the person, at the other end, they might react differently, right? And
Right.
again, that comes back to skill and practice, that you
Mm-hmm.
have in your arsenal various tools that can help you to deal with different sorts of personalities and different sorts of reactions. Because as I said, whatever you say and do, some people might just go into silence, some people
Right.
might go into saying, no, but I disagree with that. And how can you say that? And the other people might be, very passive aggressive, they'll say
Yeah.
things like, okay, if that's what you say, okay, if that's what you want, but actually go out and not do what you agreed. You see, so that's also not something that you necessarily want. You want to keep these people engaged and in dialogue. And the way you do that is by helping them feel safe in the conversation with you. And I'm not talking about physical safety here. I'm talking about
Right.
psychological safety.
Right. Without that need to self-preserve.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I love this. This conversation, is a crucial conversation. I think everyone needs to have like this. This is just a life skill. It is a life skill that goes
It is a life
anywhere,
skill.
everywhere you go. Like I said in the beginning, I don't think anyone is spared these conversations. You may avoid them, and that could be the way you think you're sparing yourself from them, but you're also suffering the consequences of not having those as well, right? Which a lot of times is your personal suffering, or just people not understanding what needs to happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
so you're either frustrated or something like that. So I love this topic. Thank you so much. Before my last question though, can you please tell everyone where they can find you? And I know you have a giveaway for them as well.
Yes, very much, right? So the first thing is to find me on LinkedIn. I write quite a bit on LinkedIn on this whole topic of crucial conversations, and I try to make it relevant for different people, right? So recently, I published an article on crucial conversations for senior management teams, and why it's important at that level, with that level of power in the system, that you still need those skills. But I will also write about crucial conversation for agile teams or for project teams, or for technical people, because the skill, as I said, is such a life skill. It can be used in so many different ways. So if you search Shivangi Walke on LinkedIn, you're able to find that. And I think, Tanya, you'll send the link there too, right?
Yes.
What I would like to give everybody is two different things. One is the first chapter of this book called Crucial Conversations, which anybody can, of course, access on Amazon. I think the book is readily available, and it is, there's like 1 million people who have actually, encountered this and said that this is a very, very useful skill, right?
Yes.
So I think that's something that
I want to say, you guys, too, I know people, give away chapters of a book here and there, and you're like, some people are like, well, what's the big deal? It's just a chapter. What you will learn in this single chapter, I'm telling you, is so powerful. A lot of what she's discussing in further detail, studies that have been done. It is a powerful chapter. And I believe it's like 18 pages. Like in 18 pages, you will get so much information.
Like a full overview, right?
Yeah, you get a full overview, but there's also already skills in it. Like it makes so much sense. This is probably one of the best like free chapters I've come across. I got to be honest, Shivangi. Thank you so much. So guys, like don't pass that up. It maybe doesn't sound, as luxurious or whatnot, but I'm telling you, it was so powerful. I was like, this is I literally didn't put it down. I opened the tab and I was like on.
It was, yeah. It is very well written, right? And the other thing is this thing, which is a test that is called your style under stress. And I think this is very important for us. It's a self-reflection tool, right? When I'm stressed, how do I react? Because as I told you, I might be the sort of person who goes silent, or I might be the sort of person who's trying to push my views. And then the more you know how you react, the quicker you can understand that this conversation has gone crucial, right? So it's sort of an online test that people can take, and then we can send them their results. We call it, as I said, the silence and violence. What's sort of your silence score, what's your violence score, and there are some instructions around how you should be taking that test, thinking of a particular instance, for example, of a crucial conversation, so that it doesn't become very neutralized, because otherwise if you say, oh, it depends for everything, then it becomes difficult for you to understand. But it's a self-reflection tool. So I think those
I love that.
are the two things that I'm quite happy to share with your audience.
Yes, and this is really your first step to taking action, to actually figure out this skill. You can start to get to know who you are, how you act, because you may be hearing us talk and go, yeah, I should really figure that out sometime. Well, this is your stepping stone to figure it out. And that actually might be the answer for my last question, so you can let me know. But so my last question was going to be, what can we do this week to work towards having successful crucial conversations? Is it for us to fill out that paper?
Well, I think what you could do this week is, and you can watch this talk again, right? Because I think, Tanya, you have recorded that.
Yes.
Is really to practice that skill that I said. When you know that you are going to enter, or you have just entered a crucial conversation, try to just reset yourself and say, what are the facts in this situation? So the one little thing, one micro thing that you can do is, in your mind, separate fact from story, especially when you feel very passionately about something, because that's the time we fall into the trap of considering that our story is a fact, right? So I think this little micro skill might be very helpful whenever you're about to have that conversation, or even prior to having that conversation. Try to separate what is a fact and what is a story. And I think that that will really help you, because one of my realizations when I did that exercise years back, and I continue doing it when, when it's necessary, is that at that moment, especially if your emotions are high up there, you find your story to be a fact.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So I think that itself is a great skill too.
I love that. Okay, guys. So this week, remember, we're paying attention at what is your story and what is fact. How do we separate those? Try that, and you might be a little distracted in your conversations today because you're going to be thinking like, which one? But that's okay. Just for 1 week, try it out. And I think that's a skill, like Shivangi said, is going to develop and grow and just touch really every part of your life. I mean, I see it. Parents, relationships, like all of it, guys.
Partners,
and
neighbors.
Yes, everything. We are always dealing with some conversation that's, weird. Okay. So, well, Shivangi, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure. You guys, being on top doesn't make you a leader. So get out there, grab the book, check out her site, get the tools you need so you can lead with success with these skills. So again, thank you guys all for being here. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow. As always, I love connecting with all of you on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. You can find me at My Design Life Show at Tanya MFK. And don't forget to check TanyaMFK.com to learn all about our workshops, retreats, and programs. And remember, your someday starts today. Make it the best. I'm Tanya MFK. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. You can catch us every week at 1 p.m. EST live on the My Design Life Show Facebook page and on YouTube at the Tanya MFK channel. See how the challenges go by following us on Facebook and Instagram at My Design Life Show and at Tanya MFK. Do you have a method, tip, or hack you'd like to share or explore? Submit to be a guest or suggest a topic by visiting mydesignlife.show.